This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruitment podcast. And boy, are we in for a treat today, because for the first time ever, I think, I'm sure there'll be somebody that will go and find out that I've got that wrong. We are about to have the first ever Rec2Rec collaboration on a podcast here I'm recording here in the UK, but it's actually an international Rec2Rec podcast as well. So I'm so excited. It's going to be a slightly longer episode than you would normally expect from the Recruitment podcast. But I think when you look at all the things we're going to be talking about today, there's just so many topics we need to cover. And we often say that Rec2Rec is kind of the dark art of recruitment. So we're going to lift the lid. We're going to reveal our secrets. And I'm so excited to welcome actually two fellow podcast hosts and two very, very dear people to me, I have to say, for very, very different reasons, but that will all become apparent as well. So without further ado, and in no particular order, I'd like to welcome to the podcast today, Susanna Gray-Jones and Callum McPhilbin. Welcome to you today, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And you could too,
Hey,
Cal.
yeah, absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure as always.
That was very chivalric of you. So in that order, without further ado, Susanna, would you like to explain who you are and what you do?
Of course. Well, what a lot of people might not know who are listening to this is that I've always been a little secret fan of this podcast, and I've been secretly trying to get on this podcast for a long time. So I'm chuffed to be here, literally. Big fan of you, Lysha, and everything that you do. And yeah, I'm from a recruitment background, worked in education recruitment 13 years, worked my way up. Did the slog and then started my own business just after COVID a couple of years ago. And I just love recruitment. And I think it's such an honor to be able to do what I do. So yeah.
Love it. And I love the girl fan element as well. But, joking aside, Chime Search was launched in COVID. Do you know, I actually didn't know that part. So that's really cool. We'll definitely come back to that then. And your podcast is called?
The Counter Offer. The Counter Offer. So tune in.
Definitely tune in. Yes, I did comment on your episode. Well, thank you for that. So Cal, tell us all about who you are and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Callum McPhilbin. I am a Rec2Rec, just like you two lovely ladies. Been in recruitment now for 2 years. Somewhat fell into it, like everyone sort of says. Obviously work at Hire Group, have my own podcast as well called Humble Billings. That's it in a nutshell, really, in terms of where I am. The journey into recruitment's been somewhat different to others. I think there's a personal factor to myself to why I'm here, thriving in today's market. And yeah, really, really happy to obviously be on this podcast, Lysha. You were on mine as well, which was a very wholesome one where we discussed about your relationship with my father, etc., which is obviously a big reason why I'm here today. So yeah, that's it. People might have seen me on LinkedIn. I use sort of LinkedIn like Twitter, if I'm honest. I've never had Twitter before, so it's sort of my platform to put a lot of random stuff out there. It's borderline professional at times, but
well, I think we all sit on that borderline of professional and personal, but that's what LinkedIn has definitely become. And yes, actually, I've been on both of your podcasts, and what we will do when we're producing the show is make sure that we have those links to your shows as well, where I've been on it, because obviously that makes absolute sense. And what I like is actually that I fell into recruitment 25 years ago, as did your dad, and you fell into it only 2 years ago. Did you fall into it, Susanna?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's a long story how I got into it. My dad was a head teacher at school, and when I was a kid, I was like sat in the classroom. He was like, "Check out that teacher. Are they any good?" And I had to like sit recruiting at like 12 years old. So it's kind of like you could say I was born into the role.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's so cool. So go and tell us about your dad then. So he was a head teacher, and he would say, "Go and check out that." So like, go and look at their profile.
Yeah, well, teachers would come in and do trial lessons.
Yeah.
Like he'd always be like, I want to know what it's like being in the classroom with that teacher. Did you feel engaged? Did you feel these things? So I felt like I had this little kind of like special position being headmaster's daughter. I sound like such a little posh kid, don't I? Headmaster's daughter. And it was just like, yeah, it was just really, I just love it. I love matchmaking friends. I love finding out about different people and working out who would mesh well together. And it's one of life's glorious things, isn't it? Sort of mixing different personalities who are also different, let's face it, and seeing how they gel.
Very much so. Well, I've never heard that anybody come into recruitment because their dad was a head teacher before. So how did you then vicariously end up doing actual recruitment of education then? How did that come about?
I didn't even know it existed. I was in sales, had courage to get on the phone to people. And then someone was like, you should try education recruitment. And remember back then, everyone used to say recruitment's so cutthroat. I remember my boss saying to me, good luck, Suze, you'll struggle. It's so cutthroat. And it's absolutely awesome. I mean, it's freaking hard, isn't it? But like, it's such a great job. And it felt natural to me because I studied education and the sales part as well. And I don't care what anyone says who's listening to this, sales is part of recruitment. Sales in a nice consultative way, but it is part of recruitment. And if you are good at that, then it's likely that if you can do the multitasking thing, I think that you can be an elite recruiter as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. And we will definitely come back to that, hold that thought about sales and this, as we record this, you're probably listening to this now as we've turned into 2024 or we're about to turn into 2024. But as 2023 has been one of those years, it's been the leveler year. And it's where the concept of sales and business development has been used as a kind of, double-edged sword. And I'm really pleased you've said that, because I think, to me, the best recruiters and the most natural recruiters are the ones that don't think about the fact that we're selling. That it's a natural process for us to do it. It's not, oh my God, I've got to pick up the phone and sell it. It's, oh, I need to speak to that person. And that's why I've always maintained that if it feels arduous to actually pick this up, you are in the wrong job.
Yeah. And I think when people say sales as well, they often think of that stigma, don't they, of car salesperson, but sales can just mean influencing people and being able to have a positive consultative approach. And I think that's what I like to try and have anyway.
Yeah, I love your story. That's so cool. And just before we move on to Cal, and your dad, so you do the whole singing thing with your dad, don't you? The choir. I love that part of your personality. She's got an amazing voice, Cal. She's got the voice of an angel.
Really?
Yes, everybody needs to know
that wins
about
over
Susanna.
candidates.
Oh, she's just embarrassing me now. But I think the creative element's really important as well in recruitment, and like just going through LinkedIn on a daily basis. Like I see both of you guys posting awesome things that are really creative, and I think, oh, that's really like unique. And I think it can be a really good skill for a recruiter to have that creative element.
I definitely agree. Well, we'll definitely come back to the LinkedIn element. Well, thank you for that, and I think you should definitely sing more on LinkedIn then, if you're saying that. Cal, you indicated in your intro that we're here because of your dad. I mean, you're here because of your dad for biological reasons, but let's talk contextually how your story into recruitment began with your
dad. Similar to Susanna's dad, actually, I was a teacher for 4 years and worked in a high school. It was a borderline mainstream school, so it was under special measures at the time. As you can imagine, obviously that comes with its challenges. Actually never went to university, so the job itself was sort of an apprenticeship. So I went to college and sort of did that whilst I was doing a course there. Started off in the P department, sort of worked my way up essentially to head of year at the end point. Like I said, I was there about 4.5 years. Now, this was before my dad passed. So for context, my dad passed away in 2017. I started in the school at 2018, but there was almost this sort of like cloud over my head where I was constantly, wanting to achieve more. As a 18-year-old getting called sir in a school, like, it's a pretty good achievement in itself. But I think for me, the money element, I mean, you can get paid well in a school. You are prorated for all the holidays, X, Y, Z, and I think I started seeing a lot of advertisement online about recruitment. I spoke to a few friends at the time. They were like, "You'd be really good in it," and I was like, "Funny enough, that's actually what my dad did." So I looked into it a little bit more. My dad obviously still has a LinkedIn profile, so I sort of remember going on his profile, seeing what he did, and he did Rec2Rec. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do recruitment, like, I'm going to do something similar to what my dad did. Funny story, actually. I always remember being quite young and walking around Argos with my mum. As a kid, as you do, you sort of go, I want this, I want that. And she just quite angrily gritted her teeth. She was like, ask your dad. I was like, why? She was like, your dad earns my yearly salary in a single month. I was like, give it over, no way. Obviously, I was a young kid then. And I actually brought that conversation back to my mum at the time, and I said, look, I'm going to join recruitment. Like, you're probably going to hate me for it. She was like, no, I think you'd be great at it. As long as you can sort of balance the emotional aspect and don't get overwhelmed like your old man did at times. Go for it. So that's essentially what I did. I remember in my interview process with Matt Sullivan, who runs Hire Group, and obviously when I told him that the reason why I'm here, similar to what you said, Susanna, like you didn't know what recruitment was. And I honestly didn't know. It was just something that my dad did, and I know that he earned a lot of money. And I think that just that sole reason, having that personal driving factor of wanting to curiously explore an industry which to me was quite close to my heart. Not saying that's the only reason I got the job, right? I'm pretty good at what I do, but it was a big element into why I essentially got hired. And I think it's all about, for me, trying to finish off his legacy.
No, that's just made me go all goosebumpy. That is nice. And I said to you on your show, and we covered a lot more around sort of the history around your dad, and your dad had an alcohol condition, didn't he? And
yeah, he did. Yeah,
and it overshadowed his life. But he was a brilliant recruiter, and he was definitely cut from a traditional recruitment cloth. He was from my era, so to speak. Although obviously I'm still in it. I think your dad had gone more into management consultancy, but I think the personal drive will be resonating with a lot of the listeners, because a lot of people who come into recruitment, certainly post COVID, have possibly seen, like you've said, it may be relatives, friends, whatever, going to what is an incredibly rewarding career, but maybe don't realize how challenging it can be. And that's actually, I really kind of want to just stay with you on this, Cal, because I guess what you've experienced in only the 2 years you've been doing it is the most extreme years I've seen in almost 25 years, which is this, 2022 with this balloon of opportunity. You literally could not fail to make money last year, pretty much.
Yeah.
Really, there was an abundance of candidates, an abundance of opportunity for every market, really. And then this year, it all fell off a cliff pretty rapidly, and it was rapid. It was a tsunami at the start of the year. So how have you, as a recruiter yourself, never mind a recruiter of recruiters, but how have you as a recruiter adapted in what has been a really kind of, I guess, totally contrasting 2 years?
I think, yeah, like what you mentioned then, Lysha, obviously when I got into recruitment last year, I did a deal on my 5th day. I still hold the record for the quickest deal ever in the business. And from there, I was like, this is a piece of piss. Like, excuse my French, but it was honestly
swear.
like
it's my pod.
Okay, cool. Well, it was a piece of piss anyway. So yeah, it was like, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like I've just earned, X amount of commission on this deal that I've done on my 5th day of the job. But yeah, going back to your question of I suppose like how I've managed, last year to this year, I think it's a good point to discuss about my dad again a little bit on that, because my dad he was undiagnosed ADHD. Now I am diagnosed ADHD. I think that obviously if he was diagnosed, he could have had support and stuff like that through. Obviously his journey, not saying it could have, changed his death in the end, but it was a big sort of self-development piece, which I wanted to focus on myself, because like, he was a very exceptional recruiter. But what I do see in myself is that, naturally we are quite emotional and we can spin numerous plates at once. My legs constantly shaking on the table now. I'm, quite hyperactive in terms of my energy. And I think it was a real grounding moment when the market changed, because like I said, you sort of go on this roller coaster. It's quite naive to think that it's going to go all the way up and not come down. But for me, this year has been a struggle at times. Emotionally, it can like sort of ruin weeks, if not months. And I think, my dad's his way of dealing with that was through alcohol. So for me, it's about finding the root cause and the grounding, the stability of keeping myself above water, keeping my head above water at all times. And I have a bit of a saying that, you don't need to sort of keep your head above water by treading water. You can just put on some armbands. Them armbands can be external, internal support. Listen to podcasts like this and just really understanding that I think recruitment is it's a long game. And I was quite naive at the start, you know, 5th day on the job, done a deal, thinking it's going to be like that for the rest of my life, when actually we are in the epicenter of, you know, a human capital asset business, and you know, fluctuations and ebbs and flows are going to go, and we're going to feel every single little bit of incline and decline. So yeah, for me, it's been more about you know, forget about Callum being a recruiter. It's more about me as a person, just to keep my head above water and embracing the dips.
I'm really pleased that you talked about that in terms of how your dad dealt with things, and the sort of, I think the whole narrative around mental well-being has totally transformed to when your dad was at the peak of his career to where you are now in your sort of growth area. And I think I'm so relieved that we feel safe enough to talk about these things publicly. You are vulnerable, sharing that with everybody. But the fact is, by sharing it, that makes people feel less vulnerable by saying, actually, it's been really shit this year. And there have been moments where I've gone, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So I think it's great that you have shared that with us. And I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, recruitment is cyclic. It's never, ever going to just be at the top of the roller coaster. You become the best recruiter actually from markets like this, let me tell you. So, you know, and it's not naive. You're not naive. You're at the start of your recruitment career, Callum, at the end of the day. You've got to be kind to yourself. But I like your analogy. I think it's really important that somebody listening now will go, actually, you're right. And I haven't necessarily got either the right people around me or the right coping mechanisms for when I have a shit day. Because you are going to have days like that, whether it's exercise, whether it's, you know, going to a spin class, going for a swim, physically doing something really proactive for yourself. But actually emotionally, you mentioned the word emotionally, I think having the right support people around you, knowing and recognizing that we are total barometers of every little thing that's happening. If you think we've had this like total tsunami of you know, high interest rates, high inflation rates, we've had the Ukrainian war, we've now got a Middle Eastern war, you know, there is still a human capital issue. We still have a massive deficit of skills in STEM, in recruitment. So it's all these continual factors that are actually out of our control and influence. So I'm so pleased that you've shared that with us. So thank you for doing that. Susanna, your journey obviously might be slightly different, but how do you cope with the ebbs and flows and the highs and the lows?
Oh my gosh, like, there's so many different things, aren't there, that like can just affect your mindset. So I can scroll through LinkedIn and look at my competitors, for example, and think, oh my gosh, they're doing that. Maybe I'm not as good. And or you might just wake up after having no sleep, or you might just have a day where you're just not feeling yourself. Or you might look at someone else doing really well and think maybe you're not. There's all these different things that can affect the mindset. So for me, one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned is James Clear process. Just concentrate on the process. I try not to look at the news anymore. I block it out because it just takes me off my track. I try not to think about what outcomes I want, because again, it just takes me off the track. Like I speak to you a lot, Lysha. You are a great mentor, and you'll often say to me, like, Susanna, that was an amazing month, well done. I would never admit that to myself, because I almost don't want to admit when it's going well. I just want to keep on the process. I'm so scared, almost like in an autistic way, you know. I'm literally just like, keep on the track, don't let anything get you off. It has been a really tough year, but in a different way. I don't think it's more just kind of adjusting the process. So for me, whereas it might have been easier just to get trainees into roles, a lot of clients are a lot more reluctant to take on trainees or to make risks. So in many ways, it's an advantage, because it's a time that we can really get those passive candidates and work on our pipeline and get the bigger fees, if you like. So for me, it's not so much that it's affecting me in a bad way. It's more the adjustment and having to learn to do it a different way that has been the biggest challenge for me, I think.
And actually, from what you've said there, and thank you for sharing that, I think it's adding value to the customers. You know, that's where I mentioned it before in response to Callum, it's in the challenging markets where you really build trust with your clients, because you're not trying to just push any old trainee on them or any old candidate that's come your way. This is somebody who is trusting you with their career, wherever they're at in that journey. And I think there's a lot to be said for recruiters that have still got their jobs right now, that maybe haven't done as well as they did last year, but they're, you know, presumably washing their face, making enough money, and they're doing the right thing by people. And that's, I always say, I earned my stripes as a Rec2Rec in the recession of 2008. That is when, feedback wise, I would get my clients and my candidates saying to me, even years later, saying, we knew we could trust you because you wouldn't let us move. You wouldn't let us move, even though you could have made a quick fee out of us, because why on earth would you leave? You didn't have enough reason. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. You also made another change this year. I don't know if you know this, Callum, but Susanna moved to Dubai this year.
You're in Dubai now?
Yeah. I'm in Dubai now. This is the afternoon.
Oh, wow.
It's cool. It's cool. So yeah, I basically had a health scare last year, and it sounds really morbid, but I'm one of those people who I'm always thinking of make each day count. I know you shared your story, Callum, about, you know, what happened with your parent, and that's really sad. And I think I'm always thinking about cherishing each day and making the most of it. And I think that little health scare made me go sort of 360. What do I want to do in my life? Where's the bucket list? And I was like, I've always wanted to live abroad. And it was so scary. And I got here, I was calling you, wasn't I, Lysha? And I was saying, what have I done? I miss my family, I miss my friends. And it's like, I learned so much about myself. I think Dubai gets quite a lot of bad press because you look on the programs and it's like all the designer handbags and things like that. But actually, for me, it's been networking with some pretty extraordinary business people. Everyone's very sort of like-minded in their approach. It's always very sunny. It's been an incredible change. And I've learned so much about the processes of change in a way that I can identify with my candidates more, but also with myself. So yeah. It's been a pretty big episode.
There might just to pause on that for a moment. There will be plenty of people listening because we have a global community, which is just, it blows my mind that we have people listening all over the world. What would your top tip be for anyone that's thinking about either, whether it's Dubai or whether it's, you know, Australia, wherever, moving abroad with their career? What would your top tip be?
I think it's very easy to listen. And I think this with any change, like even if you're looking for a new job or if you're making a big life change, it's very easy to our brains are conditioned, right, to be in our comfort zone. So going back to the caveman times when it was like, I'm going to stick with my tribe because if I don't, I'll go out of the cave and I'll probably get eaten by something. So, but it is, our brains are so conditioned to feel safe. And I think it's kind of turning that around, reversing that to the whole, like, if I don't do this, if I have got 1 week left, what would I want to do? And again, I know it sounds morbid, but it's actually a really positive way to think, because I'm fascinated by aliens, right? I would love to go to space if I could. The closest thing I'm going to get is going across the other side of the world and meeting lots and lots of different cultures. So you know what, like, we can learn so much from different people who are from different areas, and I think you've got all of that at your disposal now in this life.
Susanna, you might be, who knows, in 20 years time you might be able to, even maybe less time than that, put your meta glasses on and get on a
podcast you from Mars. I'll podcast you from Mars. It'll be perfect.
I think between three of us we've interviewed enough Martians, I imagine, between the three of us, but that's a whole Rec2Rec joke on its own. No, and I think that, you know, possibly, I think I am definitely the oldest person in the room here, guys. I think that's the thing of wisdom as you get older, that you can only control your controllables. And if this is your last day on this earth, you don't want to have any regrets. So, but I think you have to, it's all doing it with measure. And obviously you consulted your husband and presumably it was a very collaborative decision to move abroad. So I think, I'm not saying it's easier for people who might be thinking about doing it to do it if you are on your own and single and you don't have any responsibilities. But I only have one regret in my life, and considering how many mistakes I've made, and that one regret is that when I was younger, with no commitments, no mortgage, no children, no business, and just worked, I should have explored the option of living abroad, even if it was just for a couple of years. So I take my hat off to you.
I want to know then, what would you tell yourself now if you were to look back? How would you tell young Lysha to just go for it?
Well, first of all, definitely say no more to more men. That's a whole different podcast. I think I'm very happy to admit I've made a lot of mistakes. And actually, one, you're probably not expecting me to say this, I would have quit the booze. I would have quit the booze very early in my adult life. And the reason I say that is that most of my fuck-ups in life have been down to, I've not necessarily been drunk, but I've been in a continuous state of hungover, waiting for the next session. And I know now, having been sort of sober for nearly 7 years, that had I been me now, and I know I'm wiser and, you know, I'm almost 50, etc., but had I had the clarity of thought which sobriety gives you, and only sobriety can give you, which is actually our default when we're born, but anyway, I would not have made a lot of the decisions that I have. And I think that's the decision that I would, that's the one piece of advice, which is basically saying no. It's saying no to societal expectation, which is go and have a drink, go and do this. So that's what I would, just be braver and bolder.
Yeah. Very hard to get alcohol over here. It is very hard.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
It's I'm sure we can talk about that, but I'm keen not to focus too much on sobriety, because people have dropped in to hear about the background to Rec2Rec. Now, one thing that is different between you and me, Callum, apart from, you know, the fact that, you know, I'm twice your age, but that's besides the point, is that I've never called myself a niche Rec2Rec. I actually recruit across every single recruitment industry, every single sector within the Northwest, whereas you've gone down that niche route. So just if we need to backpedal a little bit, just talk us through how you've arrived at this point with your desk.
So when I started, I was a graduate recruiter in London, always have been. It's funny enough, actually, you know, in the office now, we're based in Manchester ourselves. I'm actually the only guy from Manchester, you know, out of the whole office, maybe bar another one. But I was a bit put out, to be fair. I wanted to do Manchester for its ground turf. I could get on with the Northerners more. Like, I just thought it made sense. But, you know, my boss was like, no, do London. It's a bit of a tougher market. We need someone like you with a bit of backbone to kick down some doors. So kick down doors I did, Lysha. You know, I sort of progressed pretty quickly. Got a team of 3 underneath me, you know, doing really, really well on just graduate recruitment across London. And I built a load of solid relationships to the point where, you know, that's why I had to start hiring for my team to sort of deliver into them roles which I was bringing on. And yeah, I was getting a bit annoyed, because what I was finding was that the market was slowing down in terms of graduate and junior recruitment. A lot of internals were coming into play, people reducing spends. You know, the dropout rate was going like through the roof. And I remember just feeling the money sort of go through my hands. Now, there's someone in the business here who does life science recruitment, specializes in Rec2Rec life sciences, and he's done that ever since I've been here. And he was actually the top contingent biller last year. And I sort of thought, okay, he must be doing something, you know, right in his market. He's like the go-to person for that space. So, you know, I sort of did it off my own accord. Didn't tell my boss. I just sort of branded my LinkedIn as I'm doing renewable energy and clean tech in London. And he was like, I've just seen this post. Like, what are you doing? Like, you've got a team that are all doing graduates. I went, no, I'm doing this. And the reason being is because I think it's a very forward-thinking market in terms of, you know, where the world's going. I was, you know, driving down the road the other day, and everything posted on energy and renewable this and everything I'm seeing is regarding bringing the world to a more sustainable place. So I think with these, it's difficult to say obviously why. I'm still obviously learning the market itself. There's lots of pros and cons which come to that. I've been doing it now for about 3 months. I've already closed the highest deal that I've ever done, which was quite juicy, which was an associate director. But again, I wouldn't have had access to this if it wasn't for me exploring a market and a space where, in my opinion, there's no other Rec2Recs who are doing it at the moment. So it's been a bit different, because I think one of the main things for me was turning away business. Actually, this morning I had a client who rang me. He's like, I need 4 people. I'm like, I'd love to help you, but I have to stay in my box for now. And the box that I visualize is, it sounds quite daunting, but essentially it's my own business within my company's umbrella. And I think, you know, the roles that I was doing as a generalist, you know, there's 30 other people here in the office that are also delivering on them roles. So I really wanted to have my own accountability and sort of mark my own stamp within a specific market, which I genuinely thought could be of use to the environment. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm up to.
I love it. So there's like a double layer to it, really. And I think that the reason I wanted to ask you that, and I'll come on to you, Susanna, because I know that you're a specialist as well, is that you've researched it, you've seen an opportunity, it's not a saturated market, you're immersing yourself in it, and obviously you're still in that sort of learning mode with it, but actually that's where you're future proofing your revenue stream. And I think whether you're listening to this now and you're a legal recruiter, a finance recruiter, whatever, I think for me, verticalizing and understanding your market and immersing yourself in it is absolutely the way to future proof yourself and ensure that you still have a job in 10 years time. And although I started off, and I'm not sort of going back on what I've said, I immerse myself in the Northwest. All I do, I turn away business that's outside the Northwest, because I know every single agency in the Northwest. I know every single, who the movers and shakers are, who the good companies are. And so my benchmarking skills within my small parochial market, come on, Northwest, is I don't believe there's another expert that knows the Northwest, because I've been doing it for over 20 years. So I basically am embellishing what you're saying there. So Susanna, you also are a niche specialist. So how do you find that benefits you and your customers?
It benefits the candidates so much, because the minute that they talk to you, I think the best kind of Rec2Rec, or the best kind of recruiter in general, they will walk away from a conversation, ideally a Zoom, ideally not 10 minutes telling you about a job, but they'll walk away from half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour with you, knowing more about what their market is doing and having that blind spot uncovered. I think those are the best kind of recruiters. And you might not even talk to them about a job. In fact, it's better if you don't until maybe the second call, when you've already got that trust. So I think having that ability to say, okay, well, this is what you're billing. This is what you'd be billing if you went to this company. This is what you'd be billing if you went to that company. But what you don't realize is that you could actually, even though that's lower, you could actually have a higher ability to get the days or get the business if you work to this company, because they offer XYZ. So I think offering that to a candidate is offering value. And I cannot stand Rec2Recs, none of us do this, but who put posts on LinkedIn saying you need to leave your job now. You might think you're happy, but you need to leave now. I'm like, no, actually, some people, they just need to stay, and that can be our job as well, to reassure them. It's like you were saying, Lysha, during the recession and things like that, just you want to be that trusted ally for your candidate, and that is where you move away from thinking, oh, I'm having a crap month, but thinking in quarters, thinking ahead, because those long-term relationships will give you the highest fees. So we might feel like we're doing crap right now, but we could be on the brink of our biggest ever
what
year.
What she's just said, it will happen. I've been through that many cycles, and I think so. Basically, just to summarize, insights, market intel, which, by the way, you can also then do for your clients too, and you then are building. The next key thing that I've taken away from what you just said is partnership, and that's the only way to cement your future as a recruiter, in my opinion. To not even think about AI. I don't want to talk about AI today. It's just so boring. It's just so boring. It's there. It's here. We're doing it. We're using it. But the way to future-proof yourself is to create a mindset of partnership. And that's why I think that integrity is about doing the right thing every single time. And if people want to share those adverts, I mean, I don't know who responds to those adverts personally. I mean, I really don't know who responds to those sorts of job adverts anymore. Do recruiters actually? I mean, maybe the candidates of the recruiters, so maybe engineers do, but I don't believe any recruiter actually responds to an advert like that. I think you have to nurture. I think you have to court. It's quite an old-fashioned word, isn't it? But I think you have to really recognize that in a market like this, where there's so much noise and there's so many people sharing stuff, I think you have to do the right thing. And it is, I think you've actually almost simplified what we are all here to do for our clients and our candidates.
Yeah, it's a massive responsibility, and I personally don't take that lightly at all.
No,
the change that we can have on people's lives. So
it's massively impactful. It really is. Now you both alluded to it, and I actually do very little at this level, but I think it's really important, because a lot of our listeners, it's very hard to gauge. I know you both use analytics, we all use analytics, but who your actual listeners are, the only way you actually know is by feedback. And a lot of our listeners are new people to recruitment, and what they're trying to do is elevate and learn, and it's brilliant, and that's why podcasts are the best thing ever. So for those listening who are quite new on their recruitment journey, I want them to hear from you guys, and I'm happy to contribute as well, is what would your top 3 tips be to ensure that they're successful in their recruitment career? I'm going to go with Callum first. What would your top 3 tips be for anybody starting their recruitment journey at the moment?
Number one, some people might not like to hear the word, but for me, be obsessed. I think obsession's painted in a bad light, but for me, anyone successful is obsessed in what they do. Recruitment, you can make a lot of money. That's why we're all here. And, you know, taking away the transactional purpose of that is actually where you're going to see generational wealth. Similar to what Susanna said then, you know, if you are building good relationships, like the best candidates that I've placed have been from conversations I've had 6 months ago. And none of them conversations I had were about a role. It was just genuinely just learning about that candidate, where they are in their, you know, scenario right now, and just building a picture for them. I'll never, ever, ever, ever just sell in a role straight away. It's just not the way I do things. I think, yeah, number one top tip would just be obsessed. So that to me is, like I said, it's painted in a bad light for me, but it's really not. If you look at Kobe Bryant's personal trainer, he said, he wrote a book called Relentless. I watched one of his podcasts, and he said to me, he said, look, like, he is the best basketball player ever to walk the earth, you know, let's just say for story's sake. And the reason why is because he was obsessed in the small details. So obsession comes in the detailed orientated focus. And what he did was he used to walk around the basketball court and bounce the ball before every game, and notice like certain points where the ball wouldn't bounce as high, know not to go there in a game or tackle someone else if they're during the game. He was also shooting some baskets before the game, and they said to the referee, can you measure the basket? And he said, I've just measured it. They had a back and forth. They ended up measuring it. It was half of an inch too low. You don't get that unless you're obsessed. You know, there's unhealthy obsessions, of course, but I think if you really want to do well in this market, obsession comes in the details. So that would be number one. Number two for me, it probably would be the branding. Branding's number one for me in recruitment. I know, Lysha, obviously you've been here before LinkedIn. We talked about that on our podcast. You know, LinkedIn wasn't a thing.
I'm a dinosaur. Yeah, no, it's true.
No.
It just made me laugh the way you said it. I was here way before LinkedIn. I've been here forever.
You created LinkedIn. You created it. No, honestly though, in all seriousness, sorry. In all seriousness, no, I speak to many clients at the moment, and that they're the same. Like, you know, I've been asked to do personal branding training for their consultants. And I think right now, like you mentioned before, with job adverts and stuff like that, not a lot of people do apply, but it's just getting your face on people's feed and getting your face on their radar. Like, I know I am the go-to person in the market I'm doing, and it shows, because if I put, you know, something out there, the market comes to me. So that would be number one. It would be like branding, whatever that looks like in your key area. Focus on, you know, making relevant posts. It doesn't just have to be about jobs. It's a bit generic. You know, tell a story. You know, the branding is your personal story, and I feel like I've done pretty well on that. And then the last one would be, I know it's it sounds normal, but not a lot of recruiters do it. And if you are really on into your recruitment journey, just take this from me, because this is something I did really, really wrong at the start. I didn't ask questions and shut up. I would literally just like ask questions and then just like jump down the throat and just like tell my piece. And I was relating with everyone. And I think it's sometimes, you know, it was very transactional for me. I was just thinking of the fee. So asking questions and shutting up is a real big thing for me. Like, actually listen to what they want, where they are, and I think that's where you can really separate yourself from other recruiters. So that would be, yeah, all three: obsession, ask questions, and shut up, and your branding.
Definitely. Well, I just want to there's from my era, Bill Borman, who is very still prolific in the recruitment industry, very influential. He trained me back in the 90s. There's one phrase, that what you just said there about active listening, which is you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You need to use them in that order. And it's such a visual thing. It's so, and then you just don't even need to explain it, do you? And it is actually, yeah. I love your 3. And I think that obsession is because we associate it sexually, don't we, with going after somebody that you fancy. But actually,
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Although obsession, Calvin Klein.
About you.
Yeah.
You're talking. This is where my brain goes. You're talking about passion and relentless learning, and I love everything that you said. That, and I could not agree more about personal branding. And yes, I have been here in the world before LinkedIn and after LinkedIn, and I would like to think that I'm also a hugely, I'm a good advocate for how to emulate what personal branding is actually about, which is your authentic voice, which is you not trying to be somebody else or use ChatGPT too much where you're just boring the tits off everybody. I think that your 3 top tips are exceptional, and I think they're really relevant. And I really hope that whoever's listening now that's in the start of their journey, they take that on board, particularly the active listening, because I think that's a life skill. I think if every human listened more, I think we'd have a much kinder world, but that's just an aside. Thank you for those, Callum. Susanna, what would your top 3 tips be?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just want to add to that what you said about listening as well, because I found, and thinking about the trainees who are listening to this, when you go into your first sales training session, then they say we're going to talk about listening. You almost stop listening because you're like, oh, I can listen. That's easy. I know how to listen. But I had some improv training years ago, and it made me realize, you know what? When anyone's talking, even now, like, it's very easy for other people to be thinking, okay, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? So I've actually conditioned myself to like repeat in my head what that person is saying when they're speaking. And that's really helped me, because I actually thought I was a good listener, but I was a crap listener. So I love that. I love what you said about obsession as well, which is linked to my first one. So my first one is knowing what your why is, and really being intentional about it, because I agree with you. Having that obsession comes from what is important to you and what your purpose is. And for me, it's writing it down. Okay, because you can always say, oh, I think this is my why, and it's all a bit vague, but writing it down and having something physical that I can look at every day and say, this is me, this is why I do what I do. And also making sure your clients and your candidates know that, because I think I'm a Rec2Rec. Well, so what? There's loads of Rec2Recs, but what is my why? What is my intention behind what I'm doing? So together we're on a path somewhere, not just into no man's land of let's talk about jobs. My second one is discipline. So we talk about smart objectives and everything, but we often forget about the measurable piece, the piece which is tracking what we're doing. And I find this so hard, but when I do it, I'm so much better. So I think any recruiter who says, oh, KPIs, I hate KPIs, well, David Beckham was strict on KPIs and he's a world-class footballer, right? Every world-class athlete, they all need to be measuring themselves in some way. So finding a way to measure yourself and have the discipline, and not always think about what are you doing outcome wise, but what am I doing on a day-to-day basis, the small things, 1% better and all of that. Thanks, James Clear. And then number 3 for me would be the heart first and the brain behind, because if you do it from the heart, like just small things, you don't have to send a big bouquet of flowers to your client, but just small things like, how was your weekend in Tenby? Or, it was your birthday. It's your birthday next month. I'm really excited. Those little small things that you cannot put a price on, that show that someone's listened, to show that someone's cares. It just makes so much difference. And I think part of that is putting yourself out there in a positive way. Poor Lysha, when she came on my podcast, I said to her, I didn't want to like you when I first saw you, because I saw her doing so well.
She said it twice. She said, I didn't like you. I wanted to not like you. That's what you actually said.
But you know what? Shame on me, because I think it's very easy to look at competitors as threats. And I think actually they're not threats. We can learn from them, and actually you can use your competitors to motivate yourself. So back to discipline piece, when I'm having a bad day, I think, oh, this is a day that my competitor might quit, so I'm going to carry on. It's all like, we're not really competitors in this world of recruitment. We're all here to do better good, and if you've got the heart in it, then you can collaborate with people in your industry, and that's really important. And it's been a big learning curve for me.
I absolutely love everything that you said there, and I think that's for me, we don't talk about the heart element enough, and we don't talk about kindness enough, and we don't talk about caring about what we do, because it's, you know, cutthroat, we're sales, we need to make money. But actually, again, if we're talking about a career and longevity, you will burn out if you don't actually have the why. Whatever your why is, there's no right or wrong, by the way. There is no right or wrong. And I think that I'm really pleased that you talked about KPIs, because I was pulling a silly face for anyone that actually bothers to watch on YouTube, because it's still, again, like sales, it's seen as this, you know, awful stick to beat you with. But I've been doing this 25 years and I still have my own KPIs. Now, mine will be very different to somebody that's been doing it for a year, because I've been doing it for so long, but I still measure myself. I still have my activity that I know I need to do to achieve my end goal. And I think that with all of those things, the thing that has kept me so joyful, despite market conditions fluctuating over 25 years, is that heart element. I care about what I do. I give a shit about my clients. I am very often the only person, and this is quoting them, that actually asks how they are. And I'll go, no, really, how are you? It's been a terrible year. And they go, oh my God, thank God you've said that. And all of a sudden it all comes blurting out. If you want to get close to your clients, which ultimately are the ones that pay your fees, get close to your clients, ask about them, and don't do it in a disingenuous, don't go, oh, did you watch football at the weekend? Yeah, we can all talk about football and how amazing Man City is. But I just thought I'd throw that in for Callum, because I know he's a United fan. I think it's really important. But your dad was a City fan, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. That's why I chose United.
I know, I understand. I know how it works. But joking aside, I think what Susanna picks up on there is your way to be memorable as a recruiter, to be the go-to person and the trusted person, and to actually, for your own selfish point of view, to keep you in the game when the going gets tough. Because if you're really caring about people, you will see things long term. I absolutely love your reasons. Am I permitted to give my 3 top tips? Would you mind?
Oh, please.
Yes.
We're waiting.
I'm trying to make them different to your 3, because I was like, oh, I really wish that had been mine. So I think there's going to be a bit of duplicitousness, of course there is, but I think curiosity is what drives all of us. We're nosy buggers. We like to know about people. We will be the ones that will continually persist and understand and uncover and unpick about everything and about everybody all the time. And I remember when I probably around your stage, I've probably been in recruitment a couple of years, and was with my now ex-brother-in-law, because this was my first marriage. And he said, like, are you interviewing everybody all the time? And we were in a social event, and I went, no, of course not. And he just said, sometimes it feels a little bit like that. And I was like, whoa, I reined it back in a little bit. And I was like, but actually, I've always been this curious. I've always been curious about humans, and I think there's so much psychology that's involved in the process. So I think that's the first thing. I think never stop being curious. And I think if you really aren't interested in people and processes and how these things are going to pan out, again, go and do something else. I think very much picking up on what Callum said around, you know, the I can't think of his name now, the basketball player, tenacity and relentless learning. I think you have to work really fucking hard to be a successful recruiter. And I don't think people talk about it enough. You need to have such a deep sense of work ethic and tenacity that you are prepared to work longer and harder than anyone else. And you cannot be a clock watcher in recruitment. And I'm not talking about, you know, positive toxicity, about clocking off at 10 o'clock, going, oh, look, I'm sending an email at 10. I don't mean that. I mean that you're just always wanting to find out and get stuff done. And the fact is, the top billers in our industry are the ones that have put in the extra hours. It is as simple as that. You do not become a top biller by doing 8 hours a day. It's as simple as that. And the final one, I have to say this one, because it's tattooed on me in Hebrew, but B, my whole business is based on this, because it forms part of the acronym of KEY, which is quality, urgency, and integrity, and that's integrity. And we've already covered it. I won't go on too much, but if you do not do things for the right reasons, you will get found out. You will make mistakes. The whole, you know, dropping messages on LinkedIn. You talked about it before, Callum, about, you know, some of your best placements have been people you've spoken to months ago with no intention other than just building a relationship. That's integrity. You know, they will remember that. And that's why they'll come back to you. And they know, you know, they'll come back to you every time now. They will be your peers in the industry. And that's how you build a long-term career. So I hope that's been helpful for those who are new in recruitment. So we have a lot of leaders listening as well. I'm sure you two do to your podcast. I'm sure you do. And there's always a lot of, get your crystal ball out. Which sectors do you think are going to be hot in 2024 and beyond? And which ones do you think people might want to jump out of? Which ones do you think are on the decline? I'm going to ask Susanna first.
Oh, well, I think education's always thriving, and healthcare, because there's always money being put into that. I think Rec2Rec is going to do really well. I really do. I know we all talk about it being hard, but especially the leadership type roles, I think we're going to see more skilled recruiters. We're going to see the sort of junior people who, come into it, maybe leaving it, but that it will be a real test. I know Callum mentioned life sciences, which is huge, and tech is huge in Dubai, not so big at the moment in the UK, but it's going to have a surge back. They say next year is going to be on the up again. So I think it's going to be an exciting time.
Definitely. What would you say, Callum?
If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I know I just started recruitment, but again, this is just like, my candidates are the eyes and ears in the market. They've been in it a lot longer than me, most of them. So I always, again, ask questions and shut up. That's what I was saying before. And what I've been informed is that if you were to ask me 2 years ago, it would have been tech and it would have been life sciences. If you look at companies who, have sort of different divisions within their brand, it was all, let's open up a pharma division, let's open up a SAP tech or cybersecurity XYZ. But again, it really just depends on a geographical location for me. I know everyone was sort of getting incorporated in the US. Now Dubai, where Susanna is really, really big, especially in the renewable space that I'm in at the moment. So if, probably being, being a bit, what was the word? Selfish saying it, but it's definitely, in my opinion, renewable energy is definitely going to be the hottest. And the reason why I say that is because I'm working with a handful of tech and life science businesses now with, circa 200 heads. And they're saying to me, Callum, can you find me someone to head up a renewable energy brand? So that's where, if businesses that are solely focusing on one niche area looking to expand into a different area, again, just listening to the market and where things are going, I definitely think that it's going to be an upward trajectory.
I think that to confirm, it's going to be where there's essential skills which you will always need in education and healthcare, because we're always going to need teachers, we're always going to need doctors, right? In the same vein, we're always going to be thinking about ways to protect our planet, which is why sustainability is massive. And then renewables, certainly more so than any other. I think that tech, the bubble was going to burst at some time. And I think that people overhired post-COVID because of all the bounce back loans, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that it was almost like this fake recession in tech, which is why I have said to every single tech recruiter that, maybe particularly internal ones who are really good, who I've known for a long time, I've said, your time will come again. It will come again, because all these firms will struggle to, there still aren't enough developers, there still aren't enough cybersecurity people, so you don't need to worry. So I think that I agree with everything that you've said. I just think if you're listening to this as a leader and thinking about how to, again, circumnavigate into new revenue streams, just think about where you want skill short, but skill short because the need is there for growth, not because actually it's tool makers that, and work study engineers that we don't use those skills anymore. So think about, protecting yourself. What can get replaced by robotics? Because if it's getting replaced by robotics, then potentially that's that's not a growth area. And the ones, again, that I've seen, diminishing are the ones with the limited GP margins are getting squeezed, et cetera, et cetera.
I meant to say change and transformation. Like, yes. There's a biller doing 1.7 million. I couldn't believe it. Like in one of the companies that I'm trying to headhunt from. And like change and transformation. Change and transformation is huge. And I think a lot of Rec2Recs and recruiters stay away from it because they're like,
don't understand.
What the hell? What is change and transformation? But the minute that, the best way I describe it is a company that needs to have a change, whether it be finance or tech, and actually it's quite simple, and so much money in it.
Yeah,
because of this.
So on that basis, just I want to pause and ask this question to both of you then. There are plenty of recruiters. I did this, and I don't know if you did it actually, Susanna, but I've done it in my past twice. And no, not just get married. Is I've changed sectors twice. So what would your advice be? What would your top tip be to, let's say somebody's listening to this now going, oh my God, I'm in, and I'm not being disingenuous about industrial, but I know that it has been a very challenging industry for industrial because of things like robotics. It's replacing the human element, so I don't think it's particularly a growth sector for a lot of companies. So what would your advice be to a recruiter going, I know I'm good, I know I've got the skills, I've still got the desire, I've got all the things we've talked about, curiosity, tenacity, etc. How would you advise them to go about changing into a different sector that's on the up? So Callum first.
Research first before anything. Like, there's no point making the jump because you could just end up making the jump for no reason. Going back to what you said, Lysha, before, you've got to have that why in why you're actually doing it. Back to the obsession piece, you've got to have, an actual deep desire and a curiosity into why you want to explore that market. If not, and it is just for the look, you can be good as a recruiter if you're just focusing on the financial aspect of it, but to really explore a market, and if you're thinking about changing a market, speak to some people who are in that market, see what they're doing, what's their average fee size, how quickly they're turning around, is it contract, is it perm, what locations are hot at the moment. And as you do that, you start to build a bit of a picture. I'd say a very big picture, actually, very quickly. Similar to what I said before, your eyes and ears in the market are your candidates. And what I will say as well is something I personally found quite well, if you are building a market, is go for the top end. So go for the clients, because your clients can become candidates and the candidates can become clients. And when I've gone for them and told them about job roles that I've had, I start trickling down, and then I get the juniors. And if you aim for the top of these businesses, weirdly enough, they're more nicer as well. Like, I don't know why they're more like inclined into why you want to explore this space, and they're open to having an hour to 2 hour conversations instead of a 20-minute phone call on the lunch to a consultant who's been there 2 years. So yeah, building a picture, really go into the stats, the figures of why you want to explore that market, and actually see if it is viable for you as well. But definitely look towards the way that the world is changing. I know, no one can actually get their crystal ball out and say this market is going to be the place to be in. But there's so much research out there. Google's your best friend. Do a quick search and sort of, deep dive into that.
Love it. Susanna, what about you?
Everything he said. But genuinely, I think one of the things you did just say, Callum, which I completely agree with, is knowing why you're doing it, because the amount of, it is really tough you guys might disagree with me, but I made quite a few fees from people changing sector about 2 years ago, and now it's so difficult and they have to be exceptional. But most importantly, when they go to that interview, if say I wanted to go into finance, to say I want to go into finance because I want to make more money, doesn't really cut it. Have a genuine reason. I know you said this, Callum, and I cannot emphasize it enough. Like, I actually say to my candidates, you need to have a better reason than that. You really do. The toughest interview that they have if they're changing sector needs to be with us, the recruiter.
Absolutely. Hallelujah. we're the barrier. We'll come back to that in a minute. No, I agree with you. And I think, I don't know about you two, but this is why I could never switch out of Rec2Rec, because I love recruitment. I love everything about recruitment. And so I look for that level of passion and enthusiasm and due diligence from someone that's saying, look, I'm stuck doing this desk, but I really want to go into finance. And this is why I'm married to an accountant. My dad was an FD, whatever the reasons. Yeah. Those are good reasons, actually, because you've immediately got a network of people. So actually, I think you don't need to over-egg the pudding. I think it should become pretty obvious why you want to go and work in a sector. And I can't emphasize enough what Callum has said. It is not enough to say, well, because there's more money in them, their hills. Because sometimes, at some point, there might not be. And you've still got to then prove that you've got what it takes to make it successful. I'm really pleased I asked you both that. So you both interview people sat in the hot seat. And you can name names if you want to. I'm happy to tag people. But what's the best piece of advice you've both learned from one of your podcast guests? I'm going to go with Susanna first.
Oh,
sorry.
So mean. The best piece of advice that I've ever learned from one of my podcast guests is to put yourself out there. Okay, you also mentioned this, Lysha, but I think to put yourself out there, I think is so important. And it sounds so obvious, but a lot of people don't do it in an authentic way. So I think be true to yourself, and remember, people are going to slag you off if you do. They will slag you off if you don't. So just do it anyway, and get something that inspires you out to the world. Because if it resonates with one person, that's enough.
Totally.
Familiarity.
I love it. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And if you have to be Marmite, just be Marmite. No, I love that. And I that again, this is all so holistic, because Callum mentioned before about personal brand being one of the key things that we need to think about as recruiters. So what you're saying there is that, but you have to then go and put yourself out there. I love that, Susanna. That's great. And thanks for the mention. What about you, Callum? What's been the biggest learn from maybe one or all of your guests? Doesn't have to be one.
So first, I'd just like to say I do wing all my podcasts completely. Sort of learn that people don't like the fact that I don't really structure it. So one thing I have learned, funny enough, is actually just like using my diary. Again, just having sporadic ADHD, everything's stored in my brain, but other people do like to see things. So, I've sort of learned that your calendar is your best friend. I know it sounds so normal, but like I actually never used my calendar up until about 6 months ago. But in terms of what I've learned, which was really interesting on my behalf, was that recruitment isn't all about charisma. Now, we're all salespeople. I thought, you have to be a recruit, you have to be really extroverted, really out there. And, I've interviewed some really interesting people. They're open to say that they're introverted, almost robotic, like, it's almost like they are a chat GBT or whatever. And it's sort of like their processes, their discipline, their views on, they're not out every night on the pub celebrating an interview or a deal, and more often than not, they're actually really, really good at the job. And that was a big learning curve for me, because I honestly thought that if you weren't the loudest in the room, you're not going to be a good recruiter. But that, was quite interesting on my behalf. I think another one was that people buy from people. Obviously, relationships is everything. And, I've also learned, I learned that people don't always buy from me, because, I'm a certain caliber of an individual. If I am speaking to someone who is, a finance driven, business savvy guy who, doesn't really like the way that I speak, like I can't, I don't ever have a phone voice or anything, and that they're they may articulate their words to a certain degree, and I just can't do that. I'm just myself. And that's okay. Some people don't gel, and I used to really push for that. I used to be like, no, like, this business is hiring. Like, I've got to make sure that, I'm building relationship, and times would come where I'd try and be someone I'm not. So similar to what you were saying, if your mom might, like me or hate me, I am who I am. And then lastly was an interesting one. And again, I'm sure most people know this, but I think it really hits home when you just really dissect and understand it, that the most successful recruiters in life had failed more times than succeeded.
Absolutely.
And that's something, again, which I'm just learning now. I had a lot of success in my first year. In my second year, I'm open to say I've failed more times than many, changing a market, being in the epicenter of, a so-called recession, hitting my head against a wall over and over and over. But pressure makes diamonds, girls, and
it does.
We get out on the other end.
We're all shining. Just on that, I do genuinely think, and it's how the language that you use to yourself. They're not fails; they're just learning experiences, and that's the only time it becomes a fail, if you're not learning from it.
So on that, Lysha, sorry, quickly. So there was a saying that I read as well, and instead of like trial and error, it's test and learn.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. If you're into this whole premise, by the way, there's an amazing podcast out there called How to Fail by Elizabeth Day. And she's just amazing. And she brings on, obviously, celebrities. I wish I could go on there. But it's all about their biggest fails in life. And it's just the whole premise of it, that you would not be where you are now if it wasn't for the fails, so to speak, the test and learn. And I just want to come back to you on your second point that you made, which is basically the premise of the law of attraction. I do not want to recruit for everybody. I can't place everybody. And I've always said that if to some people that I might come across as a little bit fluffy, I don't think anyone who actually knows me thinks I'm fluffy, but I'm not hardcore. I don't go out boozing, and I'm older, so I'm not going to attract, maybe based on that, I don't know. But actually, I don't care, because I want to partner the people that get me and that I'll then get. They don't have to be like me. I'm not talking about cloning, but it's the law of attraction. It's, you know, you are not going to adapt yourself necessarily to attract somebody that you don't actually then really like. I think likability is a massive thing. That's what I think too.
Yeah,
definitely. Now, before we go, I've just got, and I actually think I wish I could ask the audience that are listening now, but I mean, I guess you could put this in the comments, guys, that I personally think, and I'm going to be really controversial, and you two know what I'm going to ask. I think that Rec2Rec is the hardest recruitment job in the world. What do you both think? I'm going to go for Susanna first.
Oh, again, she's picking on me first. Do I think it's hard? I think there are so many Rec2Recs who leave the industry because, and they're really frustrated because they think recruiters should know better. And recruiters are the worst when it comes to ghosting, to accepting counter offers, all the things. We're the worst. We're a bad breed when it comes to reliability. There's a stigma against that everywhere that you look. So yes, I do think it is hard. Do I think it's the hardest? No. Mainly because you have access to so many. LinkedIn is thriving with recruiters. So actually finding them, if you're in some industries, like for example, education, finding teachers is almost impossible because they're not in in one defined place. So I think actually Rec2Rec is not that difficult. I don't want to sound like a twat.
No, I love it. I didn't want it to be contrived. You're not being a twat. And I'd just like to say that Susanna's obviously, she's not homogenizing all of recruiters, saying that they're all shit and that you ghost. But when a recruiter ghosts you, and when a recruiter gets a counter offer for the wrong reasons, that's what you're saying in those examples. We
have a reputation for being like that. You look on LinkedIn at very angry Rec2Recs, but actually, you know what, like we're all the same. Recruiters, everyone, we all get swayed by counter offers. We get flattered by the headhunting call. I'm a big advocate for all recruiters out there, and we don't always act in a way that is better than everyone else because we are recruiters. That's the thing.
True. What about you, Callum?
To put it politely, I think that we're in a no bullshit industry. Our clients are literally other recruiters, so there's no hiding, no lying. They know the script, and I also think that what you said, similar than Susanna, like there are a lot of shit Rec2Recs out there, but for me that just gives us a gap to showcase our excellence. Like for me, it's very easy just because the latter end of our title, a lot of people forget about that consultative approach. We're recruitment consultants. We're not just recruiters. If you can offer more than a CV, I get candidates, clients come for me for market insights from competition, benchmarking, whatever that looks like. You've got to offer more than a CV. I've even put people in contact with like marketing agencies to help with their branding because someone might have took a role elsewhere because their LinkedIn look better or whatever. And I didn't do a deal with them. I just helped them because it's like I want to help you. And I'm not just a recruiter. I'm a partner. I'm an extension to my businesses, and the ones that I work with, the select few, couldn't see themselves growing without me. So in terms of, do I think it's the hardest? It's definitely difficult, and we have got a stigma as Rec2Recs just being just annoying, really. We have to headhunt, so do you, but at the same time they definitely need us more than they think, and that will definitely show, because if you look at how many Rec2Recs are popping up now over the UK, there's a bloody lot of them. So it must be,
compared to when I started, there were about 3 of us. We are a necessary evil, absolutely. But I think I love the fact that there was no necessary agreement with that. I think that's everyone's experience has been different. But I think recruitment itself is challenging. And I wanted to finish on that question because if there's one thing that I want people to take away from today, it's that we are doing the same job, and be kind. Whether it's you getting a headhunt, I mean, I actually don't headhunt, but that's just because I'm different to every other Rec2Rec out there. I'm totally inbound. But if you're engaging with a Rec2Rec, just be kind and just think about how do you like to be treated by your candidate or client. So that's the reason, it was a bit contrived, why I wanted to ask that question. I mean, we could carry on all day, but we all have jobs to do. So I can't thank you both enough. This has been the most gorgeous dynamic, and we need to do this again. We'll maybe do it again on one of your shows, possibly.
Absolutely.
Let's do it. So obviously we'll make sure everybody's contact details, podcast information, wishing you both the most wonderfully prosperous and healthy and happy and joyful 2024 and beyond. Thank you both so much for joining me on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
Thank you for
My
inviting.
absolute pleasure.